Hello and welcome back to Fleetwood Area High School's election coverage of the 2016 presidential election. My name is Tristan Spanin. This period, our panel discussion will focus on the economy and taxes. There are 63 electoral college votes up for grabs as Wisconsin, Indiana, Illinois, and Michigan stop in to vote. The polls have officially closed in Tennessee, Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky. We have the results for some of those polls now. First in Tennessee, represented by Mr. Kachanas's fourth period class, its 11 electoral votes have been awarded to Trump, with a final vote of 10-7. Trump claims Ohio and its 18 electoral votes. Ms. Jarasinski's fourth period class voted 11-9, giving the state to Trump. Moving on, we have Ms. Rankin's fourth period voting for the state of West Virginia. Tiger TV is confident in reporting its 5 electoral votes will go to Trump by a margin of 9. Finally, the faculty voted during fourth period representing Kentucky. The vote was a tie, and we're going to split the vote. The economy and taxes has been a hot button issue from this campaign on both sides. Our election day correspondent, Bianca Javaria, is with the voter now from Ohio. Bianca.
Thanks, Tristan. I'm here with Ms. Rankin from the state of Wisconsin. I wanted to tell you that 45% of Ohio thinks Clinton will create the most sustainable jobs. Does this surprise you in any way, being that Trump campaigns on the fact that he is a businessman?
No, not at all. I think Mrs. Clinton has a very workable business plan. I think she's thought it out very well, and I don't think Mr. Trump is that good of a businessman, seeing as he's been bankrupt several times, and I don't think that he can create jobs. I think the Democrats have been on the right path for the last several years. Unemployment's down to 4.4 the last month, and I think she has a great business plan for America.
All right, that wraps things up here. Back to Tristan.
Thanks, Bianca. Moving on to this period's panel discussion. Just to review, each period will be welcoming 2 student experts who've done extensive research on the topic of the period. They are here for a conversation on real issues, and the points that they argue are not necessarily aligned with their own political views. I want to get started by showing both of you a clip of your candidate speaking about taxes, and then I would like to ask you a follow-up question. We'll start with Secretary Clinton.
Candidates promise trillions of dollars in tax cuts that go mostly to the rich. This needs to change. American interests have to come before special interests.
Okay, so Clinton's talking about a number of different things. One of the biggest things is a 4% surtax on people earning $5 million or more. She also wants to make sure that wealthy taxpayers, those making more than $1 million, are paying a minimum income tax rate of 30%. We've called that the Buffett rule in the past. Raising capital gains rates on investments that are held for an intermediate period, 1 to 6 years. She's raising the rates to align more with ordinary income tax rates there. And then raising estate taxes, both the top rate to 45%, but also lowering the exemption on the estate tax to $3.5 million. So the problem here is she's saying, look, we're going to levy these taxes on the wealthy. 75% of my tax increases are going to be paid by the top 1%. But the important thing to understand is when you tax the rich, that doesn't just affect the rich, it affects everybody else, because the wealthy invest their money. They don't stuff it under a mattress. They invest it in businesses. They invest it in startups. That creates jobs. That creates economic opportunities. So when you tax the wealthy, what you're saying is don't do that as much. And that ends up flowing down to businesses who need that capital.
In that clip, we hear Hillary laminating the tax cuts proposed by the Republicans. Her own tax plan would see the tax increases on capital gains, the estate tax, and the income tax for wealthier earners. According to CNBC a year ago, the top 1% of earners in the country already paid almost 50% of the total income tax revenue. Why is it Hillary is seeking to increase taxes on those already paying such a large piece of the pie?
All right, so the big thing with Hillary's tax plan is to try to make everything fair. Because, as you said, the upper class of the country is already paying about 50%. But if you look at the statistics, the top 1% makes more than 20% of the nation's income. So while they may be paying 50% in taxes, they're making about 20% of the nation's income. And while that still seems unfair, the average income of the 1% is also 90 times higher than the bottom 90% of the tax base. So the top 1% is making much more money. So while they're paying 50% of the income in taxes, it's really still about only 20 to 30% of their income in taxes. And what Hillary's trying to do with this is create a fairer tax system, because there's been instances where people like Warren Buffett have actually paid a lower percentage of their income in taxes than their own secretary, who makes significantly less than they do. So currently the top 400 taxpayers pay 7% less than they did in the economic growth that we had under Bill Clinton in the 90s. And the fair share tax plan, the first part of Hillary's tax plan is the fair share surtax. So what that's going to do is it's going to increase taxes on the upper class, and this has been shown to be effective in the past. Specifically under President Obama, it raised the effective tax rate 6 points among the upper class. And while this seems like it could hurt people, this new surcharge is only going to affect 2 out of every 10,000 taxpayers, which is only 0.02% of the tax base. The second part is closing loopholes, and this is going to keep the ultra-wealthy from gaming the tax system with things like derivative trading and the Bermuda reinsurance.
Cole, would you like to respond?
Well, Donald Trump does not want to raise the taxes on the wealthy, but what he does want to do is he wants to close all of these loopholes that these extremely wealthy people use to escape the large amount of taxes that they have to pay. Like a lot of the people who are extremely wealthy, specifically he cites people on Wall Street, they are using loopholes to pay a significantly smaller portion of money than they would if they did not have these loopholes.
Alrighty. Now let's take a look at Mr. Trump's view.
Do you want to raise taxes on the wealthy?
Well, I want to do something with the Wall Street guys, because some of these guys are making so much money and they have carried interest provisions that I understand very well, and I've used them myself. I think they're wonderful, but I think they're unfair, and I want to get rid of carried interest and some other things. But overall, my taxes are going down. Big league for the middle class, big league for business, and I think ultimately everyone's going to do better.
Trump is promising tax cuts for the middle class and businesses. If we're looking at other things Trump is proposing, such as building a border wall, increasing border security, increasing defense spending for all branches of the armed service, where is the money for all these increases coming from? And is he planning on decreasing the country's revenue?
Well, Trump's economic plan is to reduce taxes on businesses. Our current tax system on businesses is at 35%, which pushes businesses overseas because it is much easier to, make money when you're paying lower taxes. So businesses do not want to invest their money in America, where they have a 35% tax on their returns. So he wants to reduce that rate to 15% in order to make it more attractive for businesses to invest domestically. Secondly, the U.S. trade deficit is currently at $800 billion per year. So he wants to reform America's trade deals, such as NAFTA, in order to reduce or reverse these trade deficits.
Well, the corporate tax is an interesting way to try to address the problem of not having enough revenue. So, yes, it would bring jobs back to the country. It might bring jobs back to the country, and it's also going to actually cut the revenue to the government. So, rather than cutting these taxes, I do think it's important that we try to keep small businesses from being stifled. So maybe tax breaks for small businesses so they can compete and keep our local economies and towns diverse and unique. But I do think it's important that we keep the corporate tax on larger corporations at least consistent, and or maybe even raise them a bit to again create a fairer, a more fair economic system.
Okay.
Alrighty. Max, I think this is your last period for the day. Thanks for all your help today. Cole will check in with you again next period. And that brings our panel discussion to a close. Let's head back to the polls where Mina Isaac is getting an update on voting. Mina?
Thanks, Tristan. I'm here with Ripley Price. I'm going to have to 82% of Ohio voted that the candidate has to release their tax returns. Do you feel the same way about that issue?
Thanks, Mina. That's a really great question. So I think that if a candidate is accused of fraud, then they should have no problem producing those tax returns, because then that will prove to the American public that they haven't committed a fraud. But, if they have, then that's on them, and that's an entirely different issue.
Okay, thanks, Ripley. We're going to throw it back to Tristan in the studio. Tristan?
Thank you, Mina. That just about wraps up this period's election coverage. Coming up next period, we'll have results from Wisconsin, Indiana, Illinois, and Michigan. Mississippi is the only state heading to the polls to vote, so we'll be welcoming some familiar faces back to the studio to debate the Second Amendment. That wraps up our coverage for Period 5A. I'm Tristan Spaneth. We'll see you in 20.